Hello, it's June 14th, 2021. And as you might recall, we left off on Friday. We go teach Monday through Friday. We're in the book of Jeremiah. Where we left off was God's judgment against Egypt, if you remember, as well as Israel. But yet, in the end, after chastising them, he said he would spare them and bring them back. So just as there's time or judgment coming, as you can see, these nations met God's judgment 2,600 years ago, but yet the time is ticking right now for many nations, here and now in America. When will time be up? Perhaps sooner than we think. No wonder Jeremiah was the wailing, weeping prophet. Now, on the weekend, we read on our own, and we were at chapter 47. This is a smaller chapter. This is God's judgment against the Philistines. And then in chapter 48 is a much longer chapter. So we'll just do commentary on these chapters. Okay. So the Philistines, they sound familiar, don't you? Don't they? Remember the 9'6" Goliath coming out to see the little shepherd boy David and says, what have you thrown to me, a dog? The Philistines were proud warriors. They were the long-time arch enemy of Israel. In fact, Israel would have lost if David was the only one that had a little chutzpah to stand up to him. Even the King Saul had no men, and he wasn't about to fight him himself. Intimidated. Intimidation is what the devil tries to do with us. And yet, what did God tell Saul after battles? Destroy, eliminate all of them. Did Saul listen? He did not. So in chapter 47, God does what Saul didn't. These guys lived on the coast. And they thought maybe Tyre and Sidon might help them, like allies. Sometimes we rely on allies. They don't always help. So they were not only beaten, as the prophecy played out, but they were plundered, everything. And they're remembered no more. It was like a poetic prophecy in verses 6 and 7. It says, how can it be quiet? How long are you going to be quiet? No one can object when there's nobody to stand in their way. And no one stands in God's way. Our culture does not want to hear about judgment. Father, they look at God as, Father Time with his big beard up in the sky, Grandpa God, a far thing off. Oh, this will never go. And so people ignore God. But yet, the liability of being unprepared, like these people were. What happened? Total destruction. God's business does not take a break. And there's no relenting in his job getting done. Now, chapter 48 is a long chapter, and it has multiple nations being judged. The first one to start off with was Moab. And Moab is modern-day Jordan. You might recall how the Moabites came about. After Sodom and Gomorrah, the daughters of Lot had incestuous relations, and this is how that race came about after the destruction. Yes. However, there's some good people that came out of Moab. Ruth, is the ancestor of the king. Balaam, if you recall, he was the one who wanted to curse Israel. He's out of Moab. Of course, when you do that, donkeys talk to you. And these were basically cousins who couldn't get along, Israel and Moab. So God, the God of Israel says, "Why do you speak with me?" The Moabites. It's kind of like they're saying, "Why are you speaking to me? I'm not an Israelite." They were proud people, and God said to them, "I am God of all the earth." God is all over, recognized or not. God says, "Okay, well, we'll see." Says, after the judgment, who's standing? Is it you or is it God? Pretty often, as you see throughout time, all these nations and people and rebellious people are all gone. No one to speak. God's still here. So the adversaries were destroyed, and all the cities in Moab was destroyed. God was still gracious. Verse 6 says, "Flee, save your life." And he speaks of their God. Let's see, it was, I believe, Chemosh. And these people could not stop the destruction of God because their trust was in their works, their own efforts. And in the destructions, they said, "Don't hold back. Give me all you got." These were people of usual ease. They were never tested. In a long time, they settled and were idle in their laziness. They settled on their laurels. They were never really tested. They were never shaken. Their impurities were never tested out. It's kind of like a fine wine or any food. Yeah, after a while, it expires. It goes bad. The taste is bad. It's spoiled. It's no good. And so impurities were not shaken out. They were not really tested. It is a gift to be shaken. It is a gift to be changed. We need to change out of our comfort levels. If not, we never grow and we get complacent and we smell. Verse 15 shows we couldn't even be ashamed. These were arrogant in pride and arrogant in their attitude. And yes, verse 29, we have heard of the pride of Moab. He is very proud. I myself know his insolence, says the Lord. In verse 30, his boasts are false, his deeds are false. Yet even in the latter days, verse 47, God, after correction, after people are corrected and they know what they've done wrong and they come back to the Lord, he says, I will restore the fortunes of Moab. So the very next chapter, let's see if there's anything to skip there. Yes, verse 18, wail and cry, Moab is broken. For he has exalted himself in scorn above God, verses and his people, Israel. So he made a derision. The Moabites ridiculed and derided the people of Israel. But even the strong are broken. There's no escape. So they tried. And God says, well, okay, if you try to escape, there's the pit. And then if you get out of the pit, there's the snare. And if you get out of the snare, there's the fire. The judgment of God is unrelenting. They no longer please God. And Nebuchadnezzar in 582 BC took over. And then the Arabs took over them. So the only hope and rescue is in Jesus. Give thanks. for God's offer of rescue. He uses the lineages, but always give thanks to the Lord our God. He is great. Let's catch up on 47 and 48, and we will go to 49 and read.